Stilgar and Jessica are in a battle of wits in the desert. Stilgar is impressed with Jessica's weirding way and, seeing her value, invites her and Paul to join their group back to the Cave of Ridges. While in the cave, Jessica and Stilgar discuss the nature of the group Stilgar leads and the existence of a local Reverend Mother. Meanwhile, Paul is introduced and put under the care of Chani, who offers him some spice. Who is this Reverend Mother? Will there be a merging of the water between the tribes of Jessica and Stilgar? Will Paul have any revelations from his ingestion of the spice? Find out our thoughts on these topics and more on this episode of The Doctors Who Read Stuff.
All right, we are The Doctors Who Read Stuff, and I am Chris.
And I am Chip.
And I'm Brian.
And as Brian introed for us, Paul and Jessica seem to have not died at the hands of the Fremen. So that's positive.
No?
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like we were really thinking they would, right? I even think in the previous section, Liette was like, well, they know to save the boy, but maybe not the mother. Oh, well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think at the time that from last week's discussion, they didn't realize it was Paul and Jessica, but they had a suspicion of who it was.
Right.
And we find out they're really just looking to save Paul. Jessica has no use to them that they see.
Yet.
Yet.
And this is kind of the thing, because, she's got all these Bene Gesserit powers that the Fremen don't fully realize. I don't think they even realize she's Bene Gesserit at this point. I think they find that out later. But
right.
She's still doing things that even us as the reader are like, oh, whoa, dang, right? So, I mean, it's kind of like, I kind of equate it to like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. It's like, you really don't know as a reader what he can all do. They don't spell it out. There's not a list. It's something where it's like you get to a point and he does something and you're like, holy crap, I didn't know he could do that. So that's, yeah.
Yeah.
And this section also gave me a kind of the opposite feeling with Paul. They've been really building up his character the entire time, saying, he realizes he is possibly, and they keep bringing it up, that maybe he is the one, he is the savior. But then he does something as clumsy as climbing too loudly. It's like even the minutia, he's not really fully skilled yet. He's still only
he
a kid.
thinks he's
he thinks he is
quiet, but to a Fremen, he's not.
Right. Yeah. And he did take out one of the Fremen, was it Jameis, on his way up to
Jameis, yeah.
Which is no small feat.
So I think it's interesting. No, and it's interesting at the beginning of this scene where, they think that, Paul and Jessica think there's really two people there that, they've heard two voices, but as soon as things start to heat up, Paul realizes that there's a whole troop of Fremen around that they couldn't even hear.
Mm-hmm.
That, they were so silent in the rocks and around them that I think Jessica makes her move first on Stilgar, doesn't she? And basically takes him down, and then Paul takes down Jameis. And then a lot of it is really Jessica and Stilgar having that conversation while Paul kind of climbs his way up the rocks. But there's a lot in that conversation with Jessica and Stilgar.
I was wondering when they had the realization that, oh crap, there's probably like, what was it, like 20 or so Fremen?
There ended up being 40.
That was it. But it strikes me that they are so... Paul and Jessica are so confident of their Bene Gesserit training and everything that they're maybe bordering on overconfidence or arrogance. And this maybe is a reality check that, okay, we're not quite as awesome as we thought we were. These people are very adept at sneaking around the desert, basically, and we can't detect them. I just think that was like a wake-up call. They're like, okay, well, we have stuff to learn, and it goes back like a couple of sections where Jessica, I think when they recovered the pack, and Jessica was like, Paul, you still have stuff to learn. Let's go continue your lessons. This seems like
Yep.
another one of those instances where they might need some self-reflection.
What I liked about this one too is once Jessica and Stilgar kind of made their peace, how Jessica had these presumptions about the Fremen that were quickly turned on their head by Stilgar. That he was much smarter. He was very sly. He listened. He had all these skills that she didn't even he would have or didn't comprehend the Fremen having. So, he kind of not really threw her for a loop, but it caught her off guard that he was much more polished and a strong leader than she initially thought. She thought he was more, I assume that she thought that they were more just these, desert nomads that lived a very hard and rough life. But, there's a lot more to him than she guessed from the beginning.
Yeah, and while Paul is up there and Jessica and Stilgar are having their chat, Paul encounters Chani.
Yeah.
And
so this is the girl from his vision.
The one that he told the Reverend Mother
Yes.
that he would meet someday, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a couple of stills from the upcoming movie. So we get to see Timothy Chalamet and Zendaya. Also get to see some neat shots of the still suit designs. So yeah,
They look cool.
It's everything I see from this movie just makes me excited for it. So
yeah.
But wasn't it her that made the comment that he was like super noisy?
Yeah, and you have to remember too that she actually was above him. Like she actually climbed not just to his level, but like had the high ground against
And
him.
we all know about
And
the
so
high
she
We
ground.
know what
almost
happens with the high ground.
That's right. But she was just, she is almost by first appearance his equal, if not superior, in multiple ways. So
Right.
it's interesting to see maybe how like the beginning of their relationship starts and then how it ends up growing through at least the next chapter, the next scene that we've read through.
So you mentioned in your intro, Brian, that Stilgar tells Chani to kind of take Paul under her wing, and he calls him a man-child. He's like, my
Yeah.
name is Paul. You'll be best to remember that.
We'll give you a name later. Shut up.
Mm-hmm.
But they keep talking.
Yeah, there's still a few things that happen before we get to that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
As
right.
Jessica and Jessica's basically trying to sell her skills and abilities to Stilgar, so that at this point Stilgar isn't sure that she's worth
she
keeping,
knows that.
but the boy was the one that Kind mentioned. So so she's basically I think there was the scene where I can't remember how they say it, but basically that are you trained in the ways of the desert? No. Are you a Reverend Mother? No.
Yeah.
What value do you bring us? But he realized that the way she took him down so quickly and the weirding way the way she handled him, that was a skill he wanted to know. But there's still not a lot. There's one character, and it's Jameis is the one that Paul's bested earlier in the scene. Kind of keeps speaking up about how we should just be rid of him. We should take their water and go. We should whatever, not help them at all. But Stilgar kind of quiets him pretty quickly.
And another thing Jessica's doing is she's she keeps going back to the bank on the Missionaria Protectiva stuff that the Bene Gesserit have kind of seeded, because she knows that she can leverage that, and she's been leveraging it since she got to Arrakis, and she talked to Mapes, I think. So she's still going back.
Yeah,
to that.
and there's a lot of stuff that's happened already in the book that kind of led to this, where when you're talking about the Missionaria Protectiva, and their work on Arrakis, there's stuff in the prophecy. There was Kyne's note to the Fremen about Paul. There was Jessica being a Bene Gesserit and being capable, and that there was kind of all these little clues along the way, and there's a lot that kind of comes to a head in this scene. Actually, this scene in the next one.
Yeah. Yep. But they mention after they agree that Jessica has worth and she can teach them the weirding way, and they find out Paul's also trained in the weirding way. Stilgar mentioned that Paul will have to be tested, and Jessica makes the comment that he's already been tested by the Gom Jabbar, and they that gets a reaction, like they know what that means. So I thought that was interesting. Because, as we find out in the next section, they have their own Reverend Mother. So maybe she has one of those. I don't know.
That's kind of what I took it as. Like, they seemed familiar with it, or at least knew of the concept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah. And then the one thing that Jessica kind of thinks as they're leaving the crevasse and heading for the Cave of the Ridges. Yeah. She makes the mental comment that this is an entire culture trained to military order. What a priceless thing is here for an outcast duke. And I thought that was interesting because, Paul seems to be he's like, hey, I can get used to this quiet life. This is kind of nice. And it seems like Jessica's like, all right, how can we take back what was ours?
Mm-hmm. So, here's an army ready for Paul to command. Like that.
What a coincidence.
Yeah. Interesting.
All right. Is it time to go to the Cave of Ridges?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot here. They get there and Jessica and Stilgar go talk, and we get a lot on, excuse me, on Fremen ways and Fremen culture. Stilgar is the leader of the Siege, and Jessica said, "Well, did I compromise your leadership by besting you?" And he said, "No, because you didn't call me out." But even if she had called him out, they still wouldn't have followed her because she is not, and I quote, of the sand. They're like, yeah, you prove that on our short journey to the cave that you would die out here. Nobody would follow you.
We also get a little piece of kind of the economics and some of the subterfuge that's going on too, because Stilgar talks about this load of spice that they have that they need to deliver to the guild, and the guild has this monopoly on space travel and banking, and the Fremen in return know that the guild will not establish their satellites or allow their freighters to fly over certain parts of the planet, so they can operate in secrecy, I guess, out in the desert. The things that they're doing, which the scene with Liette that we talked about last week kind of hints at some of the stuff that they may have underway.
And I think that was actually hypothesized by, it might have been Paul earlier in the book, where he's like, well, yeah.
At the dinner scene.
Maybe. Or maybe it was like the council meeting. I don't remember for sure, but yeah, so that I was like, oh yeah, well, check that one off the list because that's a thing that's happening. And
yeah, because I mean, Stilgar all but tells Jessica that they want to turn Arrakis into a lush paradise, basically, where we can walk in the middle of the day in this green world and that has water
Liette's dream, really. Like, you go back to that same dinner scene with Liette, being in shock and awe from Jessica's proclamation that she hopes it will someday be that.
And Stilgar's exact quote is, "The Fremen are changing it slowly but with certainty to make it fit for human life." So they're basically trying to terraform in secret out in the open. So,
another good nugget that was kind of foreshadowed in a previous scene when we talked about the maker hooks that Paul saw in a vision. Stilgar basically tells Jessica, it would be better to ride across this basin of the desert, but we can't allow to make her into this basin, which is their word for a sandworm. So, he basically says that, yeah, we ride them.
Yeah. It's like public transportation.
Yeah. And I mean, if they're, a few hundred meters long, you can get a lot of people on the back.
It's like a bus.
With better gas mileage.
Yeah.
Hop on. Oh, good point.
Yeah.
The funny part was, to me, was when Stilgar's like, well, we should get back or people are going to talk. And Jessica realizes that it's an unspoken offer, and she's actually considering it. She's like, there would be benefits to doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and she thought of the unborn child that she was carrying, and all of these details. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then she went into this little dialogue about, and maybe it's because it was from, Herbert was in the 60s or whatever, but he was essentially the offspring of the most important thing in the mind of mothers, that sort of thing.
Well, and even Stilgar's like, no, it wouldn't work because my other women would, yeah. He's and that's where she recognizes, she's like, wow, he thinks things through and recognizes potential consequences and makes wise decisions. So there's more to him than just this desert.
So he's got a good political mind in addition to his tactical mind and his survival mind. So there's a lot to him. And that's in the movie. It's going to be Javier Bardem, isn't it?
Yep.
That plays. Yeah, I always like him. So
we actually curious. Hold on. I got a picture of him right here too. Let me pull that up. Nice. Bam. This actually, this might have been a shot from Empire magazine, and it's obviously a Stilgar, and you've got 4 Fremen behind him, and the way they're all posed and standing, it looks like they're about to drop the best album of 2020.
Yeah.
It might
Is that
be,
their cover?
I mean, I would make that the cover. So.
Stilgar and the Fremen.
Yeah.
Do you think they'll use the ballast?
Maybe. They have to go visit the smuggler to get it back.
Do you think they do face melting solos on the ballast set?
They hook up the wah pedal and the distortion, and yeah.
Yeah.
This is where I hope they throw in one really good Easter egg of they have someone somewhere in the background playing the ballast set, and it's Picard.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have Patrick Stewart just playing it in the background,
that would be funny.
I was going somewhere with that. So when I recently watched the Dune miniseries that Sci-Fi put out in the early 2000s, and you saw from David Lynch's Dune that the ballast set's this huge thing, and it's so disappointing to see it in the Dune miniseries because it's little, not quite that little, but I'm trying to think of what it. Thank you. That
mandolin.
Well,
I have one of those. Don't do that for the.
I suppose it'll do in a pinch. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other revelation that comes out of this section is that the Fremen, I don't know if it's all Fremen or if it's just this siege, but they have a Sayadina, which is a Reverend Mother of their own.
Mm-hmm. But theirs is old.
But it is.
Which is helpful. Because he's realizing that he needs to find a place for Jessica in their siege.
Right.
are in their troop,
Oh,
so
yeah.
that
Yeah.
So there's a possibility here that she may be the heir
And
apparent to the Reverend Mother that is
still
there.
kind of going back to the Missionaria Protectiva at this point, trying to navigate what was planted and how she can use it. And I think she comes to the conclusion that somewhere along the lines it got turned away from the original seed, and it has changed a little bit somewhere somehow. But kind of as they're heading back, she has this overwhelming, I don't know how to describe it, this overwhelming sensation, right? And she calls it ADAB or ADAB or something like that. And she describes it as the demanding memory that comes upon you of itself. So that's kind of interesting because she started like spouting prophecy or something sacred to the Fremen or something that they immediately recognized.
Yeah.
It got a reaction. Like she would say something and then they would recite something back, and it was trippy. Like I skimmed the ADAB or the ADAB paragraph, and I was like, what happened? So I went back and I read the paragraph, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, because she like has a vision of a Fremen with this book and starts reciting from the pages of the book, about what was it, the status of the trial, and this is what he said or what he reads, and
so that was convenient. So yeah, I don't know. The last episode, our last discussion, we kind of left on this note. It's like, well, we don't really know what's going to happen. Like their place is uncertain. Are the Fremen really going to be what they hope they would be? And now we're finding that they are slotting into these places in the Fremen society easily and conveniently, almost. So
yeah,
that was just my take on it.
Yeah.
So then, and then the scene kind of shifts to Paul and Chani, and Chani gives Paul something to eat, but it's really heavily laden with the spice, and he has some fears about, what the spice did to him before. Is he going to have, is it going to have another impact on his mind? But he eats it, and then they kind of talk it.
If the pretty girl you've been dreaming about all your life is giving you something to eat, maybe you should just eat it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
But really, it's kind of that. That's really kind of the last couple things that happen in this scene is really that, and then kind of his, it's a lot of introspection on his part.
Right.
They really kind of left it as a cliffhanger. I thought, like, what actually will happen? Is he going to say something? Is he now? I also get the feeling, not having read ahead any further than this, but Jameis kind of is like lurking in the background this entire time.
Unhappily.
Yeah, he's kind of a dick.
Yeah, he really is. And I'm like, there's something that's
he's
gonna
pissed
break
because
here.
he's trying to say Paul didn't get the bet. He just he got lucky, and he he couldn't admit that Paul took him down.
I just slipped on some wet rocks in the desert.
Yeah.
The other term that kind of pops up here too is when Paul thinks about, or his vision and his terrible purpose, and that's been mentioned before. That there's something about being fulfilling this prophecy that not everything is going to go swimmingly. There's going to be some parts that aren't good too.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
A little foreshadowing. And maybe Jameis is one of those that's not going to go well for Jameis.
Yeah.
Or Paul. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think you'll get a conclusion to that storyline pretty soon, Brian.
So here's a question to leave us with. To our knowledge, has Paul, like if this comes to a duel, has Paul ever killed anybody? Has he shed blood? Has he killed somebody? I mean, we know he's trained for it, but
I would guess no.
destroyed an assassin droid, like that ball that came out of the
Hunter
bedpost.
Seeker, yeah.
He saved
That's
the shit out of me.
Hunter Seeker. That's all he's killed.
That feels like a long time ago now.
Yeah.
Just a question.
Yeah, I would guess no. I think he's had all sorts of training from the best of the best, but I don't think he's ever had to shed blood.
That was what I thought, but
because you think of the ways that Gurney would really chastise him when he, slacked off during training or things like that. That, when he's talking about, the Harkonnens are real and they'll, they'll fight to the death, and you've got to be ready. You can't take a second off. So I would say no.
Yep. Well, hey, so what you can do is you can look in the description below to see the sections that we're covering next time. We invite you to like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. If you would like to be notified when we release new content, whether that's discussing Dune or even some of the shorter reviews that we're putting out, you can enable those notifications below as well. Please use the comments section. We would love to engage. We would love to have a conversation or discussion if there were things you liked, things you didn't like, things that we missed, or just maybe you want to say hi. Go ahead and say hi. We like that sort of thing. So we will be back next Thursday afternoon with our next episode of Discussing Dune. And we are the Doctors Who Read Stuff, and we want you to have an awesome day.
Allons-y.